Now back to Smoke on the Water for more Straight Up with Sturge.
All right, welcome back in. 7:47 on this Tuesday night edition of Straight Up with Sturge. Mark Sturgis, Price Atkinson, and to the guest line we go. We bring in Joe Miller from Washington, D.C., host on 106.7 The Fan up there, as well as sideline reporter for Navy. And from all things I understand from the esteemed Price Atkinson, Joe, you know a little bit of everything going on up there in D.C.
Well, I try to do my part. I mean, there's a lot of things going on up here, and sometimes college football gets lost in that, unfortunately. But I like to keep track of a little bit of everything. So there's always a lot going on here. That's for sure.
It's funny. I heard Chuck Todd earlier on the radio today talking about how little or how less or whatever you want to call it of a college football town that Washington, D.C. is. And, having lived up there, been up there for a while, there's a lot of truth to that outside of the Annapolis area and over in College Park. But Joe, you've been around that area for a long time, and you're plugged into the Navy and especially the Maryland scene. What's this give us a little snapshot with Clemson heading up there this week. Give us a little snapshot of this Maryland program and where they're at right now, sitting at 5-2 overall, 1-2 in the ACC.
Well, I think they're in an interesting spot. There's no doubt about that. With the injuries, especially with the injuries they suffered last week, because with the Stephon Diggs going down and Deion Long going down, they're two top receivers. And I was looking over the stuff today. You look at their depth chart, and they're too deep at wide receivers. It's essentially freshmen and sophomores left over, and it's guys that really haven't, at times they've made some plays, but really they're hurt there at the wide receiver spot. And it's interesting when you look back at the season, because I think at the beginning of the season, I don't know expectation-wise, I think people would have been really excited about a 7-win season. But then the way they started off, going 4-0, and probably more importantly, the victory over West Virginia, even though, West Virginia certainly outside of the victory over Oklahoma State really hasn't impressed. But it was big for Maryland to beat West Virginia. They hadn't done it in a while. In West Virginia, the series had gone dormant for a couple years. And go back to when it was going on, Pat White and Steve Slayton had, just huge games against Maryland. So it was a big win, especially in the manner that they did it, winning 37-0. So then all of a sudden you're looking at this team and they're 4-0 with a trip down to Tallahassee coming up. And then you go down to Florida State and you lose 63-0. And then you come back and you beat Virginia in a game that, at the end of the game, I'm still trying to figure out what Mike London was doing in that game. He had the ball around the 30-yard line, and he played with about a minute and a half to go, and they played for a 46-yard field goal. They basically sat on a 46-yard field goal attempt in the rain. He misses it. Maryland wins that game. Maybe they shouldn't have won. They didn't play that great in that game. And then, last week they go down to Winston-Salem, and from the minute go, Wake Forest dominated them on the interior line, which was a little bit unexpected. Quarterback didn't play well. So I think it's a little bit of everything so far for this Maryland team this season. They're at 5-2, but if you look at the rest of the schedule, certainly going to be underdogs this week against Clemson. Then they've got Syracuse coming into town, and Boston College still a home game left for them. They're on the road at Virginia Tech and at NC State. I think they probably still think that, at a minimum, they're going to win 6 games, but still maybe hopes at 7 to 8 wins. But with the injuries at wide receiver, the injuries on the defensive side, I think they started 7 different guys last week than, what they had at the beginning of the season. So it's been a lot of injuries. That's been a big part of their season so far. They've talked about how long their injury list is on every Monday and Tuesday. So I think it's been a successful season, but there was low expectations coming in, and the injuries. And with all that said, the last year when they had, they had to go to a reserve linebacker to start at quarterback at the end of the season. It's been a little bit of a snake-bitten program over the last couple of years, and I think people are I think got their hopes up and now start realizing where they're at as the season progresses. And I think 7 wins might be where they capped it out in a couple weeks ago. Even, they knew going down to Florida State was not going to be an easy game. There was some hope that they can be competitive. I didn't think they expected to lose 66-0, but I think at this point, maybe they thought they could win 8 or 9 games, and I think it's kind of stepped back to maybe a 7-win season for them because of all the injuries.
Now, Joe, what's the mindset of Maryland fan? I mean, it's a transition year. This is the last go-round with the ACC. I mean, they get more or less taunted leaving the field at BB&T Stadium up in Winston-Salem last week to the tune of ACC from Wake Forest fans. So that has to be a little bit of a salt in the wound, in my opinion. But, you know, we've seen frustration with that athletic department, starting with Randy Anderson, Kevin Anderson, the athletic director, on down to the lack of attendance at Byrd Stadium. So what do you think Clemson's going to come into Saturday night? Is it a fan base that more or less doesn't care right now until they get to the Big Ten, and then they'll see what happens? And then a follow-up on that question, do you think Randy Edsall will ultimately be the coach that leads them to the Big Ten?
I think Clemson fans should be prepared for a lot of orange and purple at Byrd Stadium this weekend. But I think, to answer your second question first, I think they're committed to Edsall at this point. I mean, they got over the hardest part. I mean, it was bad when he first got here. And there's multiple reasons why it was just the case. I mean, going quickly back, I mean, the hearts and minds of a lot of fans were set on Mike Leach. And when that didn't happen, there was, I think, an initial disappointment. And then you had a bunch of players leave his program. There was the talk of his stringent rules and everything that went along with that. So he got off to a bad foot. Last year, you know, with everything that went down injury-wise, I think, you know, it was going to be tough for them to have a successful season. Then they started off well this year, and I think they got to a good point with him. And I think, you know, with Kevin Anderson has stuck by this guy. I mean, this was, you know, Kevin Anderson walked into a situation where he had to make two hires, the football coach and the basketball coach, in a reasonably, you know, 16 months, 18 months, the two most important hires. And, you know, it's still debating whether, you know, Edsall was the right choice. As far as moving to the Big Ten, I think it's one of those things that if you polled the Maryland fan base, I think the slight majority would say, yeah, let's go to the Big Ten. They realized that the economic situation that the athletic department was in was not good, and now you can debate whether that's due to what Debbie Yow did, and a lot of people will tell you that, and there's other people that tell you that she did a fine job there. But it's a situation that they got themselves into, that the Big Ten was there and would help their budget out, and they still had to cut these a couple sports, so that didn't help in the immediate future. But as they go forward, they're hoping that will change things for their athletic department. But I think you still have a lot of traditional Maryland fans that are sad to see the ACC go. But I don't think it was a huge divide amongst the fan base, because I think generally they see this as going forward something that is positive for their conference. And you also got to go back, and these decisions aren't made in a vacuum. This was a decision made with everything going on. Obviously, you guys understood that. I mean, there was a lot of things, disinformation, a lot of things going on. And I think Maryland saw this as, hey, we got to get off this ship because it might be crumbling. And they made that decision, and, you know, I think they're happy with that decision. I think the majority of the fan base is happy with the decision. But when you look at the football schedules upcoming over the next few years, I mean, it's going to be a daunting task, especially for this football program, to move in the Big Ten. But I do think that the majority of fans are happy with the move to go into the Big Ten. And the main reason you'll hear is the ACC that is still, you know, that is going to be functioning over the next few years. It's not the ACC we agreed to in the 50s. And I think one of the final straws was when Pittsburgh and Syracuse was added. Pitt became Maryland's traveling partner, and that certainly didn't really excite a lot of people. And the fact that Maryland, and still to this day, they really don't have a true rival, and not in football and basketball. You know, basketball, obviously everybody hates on Duke. That's been widely known, but they don't have a true rival, so there wasn't any sort of thing that kept them to the ACC. And I think overall, I think it's a move that was made for financial reasons, and everybody sees that, and everybody sort of has come to agreement that was probably the right decision to make.
Well, Joe, you mentioned Randy Edsall a second ago and answered Mark's question about him, but you know, you talk about Maryland fans, and I've been around. Boy, I've been to Byrd Stadium. I've been to Old Cole Fieldhouse. I've been to Comcast. You talk about some unforgiving fans. they're a rough bunch. But when you talk about the Maryland fan base, I go back to Randy Edsall when he walked in the door, and I'm curious, from you. I mean, is there a segment of that fan base that is still alienated by some of the things he did and said when he walked in the door, or have a lot of people gotten over that? And is this going to be? I mean, you mentioned you thought he's going to be around next year to go into the Big Ten, but I mean, do you think it's going to be a springboard with him still as the head coach? With the Maryland fan base still on board.
I still think there's a lot of people that really don't like how things started for his tenure, and they're never going to get over that unless they start winning. And there was I think a little bit of a recovery at the beginning of the season. His image, started to, and then they were able to get a guy like Stephon Diggs, certainly helped a little bit in recruiting wise, but it's not going to be completely repaired unless they go out and they have. Not only a winning season, but they do something a little bit better than some of the lesser bowls that they've been in over the last few years. I mean, you can make a very good argument. Really, what's the difference been between Ralph Friedgen's last few years and Randy Edsall's first few years? I mean, there's not much. and that is still out there. And the way that Ralph Friedgen's firing was handled, a lot of people did not agree with that. And then you have Edsall come in. He leaves his team, and just after they lose in the Fiesta Bowl, he comes back to interview with Maryland, and then he's quickly hired at Maryland, and then, 6, 7, 8 different guys leave the program, and then he has all these stringent rules. It was not and then they lose games to start this first couple years. It was not a good start for him. But I think, and maybe a little bit because of the economics of the situation, I mean, he's going to be given every chance, especially by the athletic director, Kevin Anderson, who hired him. He's going to be given every chance to fulfill his contract. But when you look forward and you look at not only this final year in the ACC and where they're at, especially physically, when you look forward to what they have to go through in the Big Ten, I mean, I don't think you see a rosy picture here over the next few years for Maryland football. They have some talent there, but that is a daunting schedule that they're going to face over the next few years, moving into the Big Ten and sort of having a target on their back and trying to go through all that. I mean, it doesn't look great for Edsall right now, but he's got to win some games to turn things around. But he just got off to such a bad start. He dug himself such a big hole. It's going to be tough for him to get out of it. But I do think in the end his contract will be played out, because I don't know if they have the financial resources to go get somebody else at this point.
All right, Joe, we're up against the top of the hour break. We thank you a lot for your insight coming up from D.C., and we look forward to getting you on the show again.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, thanks,
appreciate it.
Joe Miller. All right, off the break we go. Hour number 2 on the other side.